I'm Mattanah DeWitt.
I'm Mary Barnes. Less than a week ago, Jackson and Madison County taxpayers were jolted by an unexpected school board agenda.
That agenda, which has items that could exceed $50 million, will be considered Thursday night. So much interest has developed that the meeting will be at City Hall downtown.
Elements of a plan proposed nearly 3 years ago by Jackson pastor Brent Lay are on that agenda. New school board chairman Kevin Alexander is pushing the agenda. Lay told the board members during the Vision 2020 school reorganization debate that his plan would save $80 million.
Those cost figures were never confirmed. The previous board rejected Lay's plan, which is now known in some circles as the Alexander-Lay plan. What has many parents and community leaders upset is that the agenda items, which include a new elementary school, the reopening of Jackson Central Mary, and an expansion of Montessori schools, are not in the 10-year plan of School Superintendent Eric Jones.
Others are questioning the reasons, the speed, and the timing of the proposals. One of them would direct the superintendent of schools to ask county commissioner for $40 million for the new school construction.
During this edition, we will lay out the most controversial items on the agenda and point out what supporters say are the good things and what are the question marks here.
West Tennessee Today News Director Steve Beverly will guide us through these key measures. But first, Alexander released a statement to the media this afternoon. Here's Steve with that statement.
In recent days, I've heard from several asking why I agreed to so many agenda items at one time, and secondly, as to why the urgency to address them now. Personally, I feel that if these items are not on the same agenda, several may not be approved by the board because they are highly partisan to one part of our county. Particularly, I see this being true concerning the approval of a new North School and the relocation of Madison Academic to the Lambeth campus. If we have all parts of the county benefiting from initiatives on the same agenda, I believe it gives us the best chance of moving forward as a board. As to the question of urgency, in my interaction with county commissioners, I believe that many would support additional capital funding for our schools if considered at the same time as the upcoming request for additional jail funding. It now has been announced that the additional jail funding request of $17 million will be voted upon at the next county commission meeting October 15th. Approval of these funds would mean the jail addition would cost $49.4 million and school capital funding will total $17.5 million per recent bond issues. I contend that an additional $40 million for schools would be fair and more progressive. Better schools prevent crime. Jails treat crime. Productive citizens pay taxes. Inmates cost taxpayers $20,000 to $30,000 per year after the jail bed is built. Better schools cause crime rates to go down, resulting in less costs to build and operate jails. The County Commission has a history of rarely approving bond issues, and interest rates are now at historic lows. Please keep in mind that Dr. Jones first presented his plan about a year ago, as well as our repair list of $144 million. Commissioners expressing their support for our request and actually funding our request are two different things. We need more capital funding for schools now. Our children and their future are at stake. This Thursday, I believe that we as a board have an opportunity to move our schools forward.
Steve, your reactions to this statement?
Well, it goes like this. I think that what Mr. Alexander is attempting to do is appeal to the audience that back when the idea of spending $30 million, and now it's going to be close to $50 million on a new jail, it became a jail versus schools issue. There are even a few county commissioners who have made that argument. Why are we spending so much money on a jail which is being mandated by the state? You've got to do something with the current jail you have because of overcrowding. But what is happening here, though, I'm not sure that he has helped himself greatly in two respects. Number one, he is going back and suggesting that county commissioners have not come forward with funding. True or not, this is not the kind of thing that I'm sure some of them on that commission want to hear. It's not a good way to make a selling point with them. The second thing is he made the point, and it was somewhat veiled in what he was talking about when he said $144 million in building improvements over the 10-year plan for Eric Jones. He was suggesting, well, they haven't come forward with that money yet. So it really puts himself in a position in which you could interpret that as he saying, namely Kevin Alexander, well, the superintendent has put forward a 10-year plan and they haven't come forward with any money. Let me see what I can do in this case. So it really depends on semantics when it comes to all of this. The other thing is that once again we are playing sections of town against each other with this argument. He made the argument about partisanship when it comes to the sections of town that certain schools in the 10-year plan are being proposed as far as their building is concerned. What that does is play the same card again as it has city versus county, north versus south. We're leaving out East Jackson. To a large degree, I think maybe one of the things he has left out is that there is a plan for additional schools to be built in other sections of the community more than just Northwest Jackson. But it'll all come down to how this is regarded when it comes before the board on Thursday night.
Steve, let's begin with how we reached this point.
All right, Mattanah, let's look at this, and we're going to try to give you at home a series of graphics to try to help you one by one understand all of these issues. First off, the Vision 2020 plan. If you're new to this community, it was a massive school reorganization plan. It was 3 years in development. No, it was not popular in some sections of town because it meant 5 schools were closed, probably 2 of the most significant, and I would add 3, not that anybody wanted a school closed if they had children who went there or if they were an alum of that school. Jackson Central Mary High School, and then also it was the closing of Melissus Elementary School that had a lot of people who came to protest, and then also Beach Bluff Elementary School, which had a very loyal following that came to protest about that. That's what happened with Vision 2020, and it actually took effect in 2016. Now, the name Brent Lay that has surfaced. Brent Lay, who is a pastor that at one time was on the staff and for a long time at Inglewood Baptist Church. At the time 2020 was being presented, Brent Lay unveiled his own plan that he claimed was going to save the school district $80 million. It was based more on neighborhood schools, which is a popular thing with many people. It was also based on the fact that he also was going to say they did not need to close all the schools that were going to happen with Vision 2020. The board looked at the plan and they rejected it because they were looking in Vision 2020 about unused classroom space and why they were really spending a lot of money on power, light bills, a lot of things of that nature that they said it was just wasteful, and that's why the 5 schools were closed. The board rejected that plan. Well, Kevin Alexander, who is now the chairman of the board, shortly after he was elected in 2016, reintroduced that plan. It was on an evening in which most of the board members were not expecting it because the reaction came from Dave Bratcher, one of the other board members, who said, "This looks like Brent Lay's plan." And then David Clift, one of the other board members, said, "This is Brent Lay's plan." Alexander said at that point in time, "It's a good plan." But the board took no action on it whatsoever. It wasn't even brought up for a vote. Mr. Lay complained in some public meetings that he had not been given a fair hearing by the board members. He was also told he would be too restricted in the amount of time to present the plan in an actual board meeting. So the bottom line to it is the Brent Lay plan went nowhere, but there are elements that are on the table in Thursday night's meeting that strongly resemble the Brent Lay plan, and because they're introduced by Kevin Alexander, they are for the most part being called the Alexander Lay plan. This year we also had 5 board members to retire. They had 76 years of board experience between them. 2 of them had multiple terms as chair of the board. So that means now that the board has had 7 new members in the last 2 years. 5 of them were just elected in August to take office in September. 2 of them, Kevin Alexander and Wayne Arnold, were elected 2 years ago. Alexander was elected by a 5-4 vote as chair in September. And the agenda items that have become so much of a firestorm in the community, they were released last week on the Jackson-Madison County School System website.
Let's start with a proposal to establish an elementary school on the north campus of Northside High School. What are the pros and cons?
Well, Mary, this is being proposed by a new board member, Doris Black, who has pledged this week in a meeting with parents at an elementary school. She has pledged that she is fully behind Dr. Eric Jones, yet this is something that is not in his plan, in his 10-year plan. And I'm not sure anybody necessarily expected this. What she has said is that there is enough unused class space at Northside High School that could house up to 400 students. So her suggestion is to put a Northside Elementary School on the campus of Northside High School. Now, here are the cons that are occurred. With her suggestion, there are no cost estimates revealed as to whether this is going to require additional teachers. Is this going to cause renovation of some of the campus area that she's talking about? We don't have any details about this. This is just an idea that she is bringing to the table. And this is also one that, in an interview with the Jackson Sun, Brent Lay said this was not part of his plan to put an elementary school at Northside High. And the big question that a lot of parents would be asking, is it a wise move to put small children on the same campus with high school students? And certainly the issue of maturity and a lot of other things, that certainly has to be considered before this one goes to a vote.
The next issue that generated public debate is the proposal of a workforce training center on the campus of former Jackson Central Mary High School. Steve, what are the issues here?
All right, Mary, let's look at this. And again, certainly Eric Jones has had workforce development as a forefront of his 10-year plan. However, this was not an idea that he had, was to use the old JCM campus for this. This is one that Mr. Alexander says that Janice Hampton, who is a veteran board member, will be discussing at Thursday night's meeting. Now, the estimated cost of this, and again, we're not sure how this has been vetted at all. $2.5 million is what is on the agenda as far as what they would vote to potentially appropriate for this. What it would mean is it would reopen a school that was closed in 2016. And there's a lot of emotions here about this because there are many people who are so angry at this symbolic school for racial integration in this community in the 1960s. There's a lot of emotion when the vote was taken 2 years ago to close this school. And so there have been several situations in the board meetings in the last 2 years in which Janice Hampton has been one who has outspoken every time there was a possibility of moving a school to a different location. She'd want to know, could JCM be used? She will very much be in favor of this and probably lead the direction of this. But again, it is not in Superintendent Jones's plan to use this facility. Madison Academic, according to some estimates that have been taken, would cost far less as a location. In fact, some people have said in the past week it might even cost nothing to move a workforce training center into Madison Academic. Again, that's something that needs to be hashed out at the table. But overall, where this is concerned, this may be one of these issues in which emotion comes back in about bringing JCM back to life. A final note here was at the time of Vision 2020, when there were discussions going on and evaluations made as to what schools should be closed, there were studies taken in which one of the findings was that JCM, the original school, was structurally unsound. So the question is, A, asbestos removal from that school, that is one thing that may be discussed, but the other part of it is, can all of this be done for $2.5 million? That's a question I don't think anybody knows, but it still could come up for a vote tomorrow night.
Another item on the agenda Thursday night is to expand Montessori schools to East Jackson and South Jackson. What's involved here, Steve?
Okay, here we go. Montessori expansion to the east and south. And we did have a Montessori school in South Jackson, and that was at the old Bemis Elementary School, which now is being used as a middle school. But here's what would happen. The southern Montessori school would be Melissus Elementary. That's one that would be reopened, that was closed in 2016, according to the proposal. This is another emotional one because there were many, many parents who turned out at some of the hearings for Vision 2020 who were very upset at the idea of closing Melissa's. Bottom line to it is the board felt that there just was not enough classroom use to justify continuing this. The cost estimates of moving Montessori education to the east and southern portion of the city and the county, that has not been released. So we don't know what they are looking at where that's concerned. Here are some of the questions. The cost to recruit Montessori trained teachers for each of these schools. You don't just simply take one teacher out of another classroom and put her into a Montessori program, or him. It requires specific training into the Montessori method. And so that may be an expensive proposition that has not been listed here in anything on the agenda about the cost. The other thing, what is the timetable or the cost to implement this? When would you make this change? And the other part of it is, as far as cost to implement, how would classrooms have to be retrofitted, because the Montessori method involves students pretty much learning at their own pace, and a lot of times being able to move across a room, not just be locked into sitting at desks. So how would that change if you take Melissa's or a school in East Jackson and retrofit them for a Montessori education? Again, the cost figures can be very, very big when it comes to whether these are advisable propositions.
Finally, the issue of one bell time for Jackson-Madison County students is on the table Thursday night. This has been considered and rejected in the past. What's at stake here, Steve?
All right, Mattanah, and we've tried to be a little lighthearted here in what has become a tense situation. One less bell to answer. That's an old 60s song that was pretty catchy. This is Mr. Alexander's proposal. A uniform start time for all students across Jackson and Madison County. Now, there are many people, and I have in commentaries in the past endorsed the idea of a uniform start time, particularly because we have students starting at 7:15 in the morning at the adolescent and teen age in middle schools and high schools at a time when every scientific research indicates across the country, everywhere, that the adolescent and teen mind does not function well at 7:15 in the morning. And I've had some pushback from a few people who have said, well, if they just get off their video games and go to bed earlier at night, maybe they'd be ready to go at 7:15 in the morning. And that's missing the entire point. We can get into that debate later. But here is the point. What is not specified by Mr. Alexander, at least in the proposal that he has, is what time would it be? Would it be to put everybody at 7:15 in the morning, which most people and most researchers would say is the worst possible choice? 8:15. That would somewhat unify where we are with the elementary school students now. The most recommended time for researchers who have looked at this question across the board has been 8:30 or even 9 o'clock in the morning. There are those who argue that if you go this late, it's going to mess it up with students who have work schedules in the afternoon, particularly for high school students who have to work. There are a lot of issues, certainly, that would have to be ironed out. The big questions that go along with this. Number one, the proposal calls for implementing this in either January, and that is on the agenda as a proposal, January, only 3 months away from now, or at the very latest, it says August of 19. That's going to be a very difficult thing if you try to get this done by January, because you are going to have a monster of chaos trying to recruit new school bus drivers and trying to iron out what the schedules are going to be, who's going to go where. It is going to be a monster job. And then, Mr. Alexander is proposing $1.2 million for additional buses to handle a uniform start time. That differs greatly from what the cost estimates have been over the last 5 years in particular, when this issue has come up, in which the board has been repeatedly told $2 million would be a minimum. That would not include the costs of new drivers, and they would have to recruit new drivers to be able to handle all of these additional buses. So a lot of that would have to be ironed out at the table. An ambitious agenda There's no question about that. But so many unanswered questions, and this is one of those things that you better bring your lunch pail tomorrow night, because people are going to be there for a long, long time while all of these things are considered. It is a highly irregular situation to put this much meat and potatoes on one agenda. You've heard Mr. Alexander's statement that he released to the media today. Question is, has he bitten off more than he can chew? And we will find that out.
This is ultimately what is at stake Thursday night. School board members will meet at City Hall at 5:30 to debate these questions and possibly take a vote.
If you can't be there in person, we'll carry the meeting on Facebook Live at West Tennessee Today. I'm Mary Barnes.
I'm Mattanah DeWitt. We hope you have a great day in West Tennessee today.